2009 Volkswagen Jetta. It's got the 2.5 5-cylinder, one of my favorite Volkswagen engines. It makes good power and it has a cool exhaust note. The customer concern is that they saw some drips of oil on the garage floor, but over the last week or two, it started to get worse. So we're going to dive in here, take the engine cover off and the intake, and see what's going on. Okay, well, looks like the intake boot's not even on properly. And then on the engine cover, we just need to grab this thing and pull it up out of the grommets. Sometimes they can stick a little bit and you have to kind of work them. There it comes. Make sure you take this air intake clamp loose and pull the boot back. After we get that engine cover off, you can see the motor a lot better now. Looks like there's some oil residue over here on this side of the motor. We're going to go ahead and take this clamp off the throttle body. Then we're going to take this hose and this hose off so we can get this intake boot out of the way. Once we got that out of the way, we could determine where the oil was coming from. That black plate down there is the vacuum pump for the brake booster. And if you look right below that, you see that oil puddled up down there. So the vacuum pump is going to be our culprit. Okay, so if you look at the instructions to replace this vacuum pump per Volkswagen, they actually tell you to remove the transmission. And that sounds crazy, right? Well, kind of. Here's the issue. You see that shift selector sensor and the cable back there that goes down to it? Let me get a light here. So there's the cable right there, goes down to the shift selector or the park reverse neutral sensor, and then the vacuum pump is right there. So that's the problem. But what we're gonna do is, and by the way, you know, a lot of people say take the battery tray out. We're going to try to leave that in place for now and see if we can work around it. We're going to pull these hoses up out of the way. We will probably have to take the cable end off of the shift selector, the cable that comes from the actual shifter itself there in this little arm. And then we'll try to work around everything and get the vacuum pump out, make this job as easy as possible. Okay. I got those coolant hoses tied back out of the way a little bit, and now we are going to use a 12mm socket on a nice long extension. We're going to put it down in here and take that nut off the shift linkage. Rock this back and forth until it comes off. There we go. And then we will just move that cable out of the way. I may end up taking off the bolts for that cable there to get the cable out of the way a little bit more. We'll see. Okay, so we got that cable completely out of the way now. I went ahead and took off those two bolts for the bracket, and so they were 12mm, and then the one that held the nut on there on the end was a 12mm also. We're making headway here. We're getting a lot closer to being able to free up that vacuum pump. We may have to take that nut off I'm gonna try not to. We'll see. Okay, so at this point, we have a pipe here, and then a bracket, a 10mm bolt, and then T30 bolts that actually hold the pump on. So we're going to take this 10mm off for this bracket. This front bolt out of this bracket, or on the hard line coolant pipe there. And then, if you can see it, tucked back behind there, there's another 10mm on a stud, and we're going to take that one off too, so we'll have some room to move that pipe out of the way, because it looks like it's going to obstruct our vacuum pump removal. So I took the nuts off on this pipe, and then I put a screwdriver back between the cover here on the engine and the pipe, and I pried that pipe out a little bit and off that stud so that I could free up the vacuum pump. Take the 4 T25 screws out of the pump cover. Okay, so we got all the bolts out of the cover, and there's the cover to the vacuum pump. Now we are going to continue on taking out the T30s that hold the body of the pump onto the end. Okay, we've got the T30 on our quarter drive swivel head ratchet, and we're ready to go. Okay, so we've got this one loosened up, and then we got one on the bottom, and you really can't even see it. You have to feel around down in there and get your socket placed and loosen it up. And then there will be another one back over here on the side. Hey, so I grabbed my wobble extension. You can see it moves around here on the end of the extension in case you don't know what that is. And I'm going to go underneath the battery tray here, and you can see because this bolt is on the back side of the vacuum pump, and we're going to take it out like that. We got all the bolts out. This bracket we're going to pull out of the way, and then the pump, we're going to rock that back and forth. Yeah, it's loose now. And then we are going to guide it around that stud sticking up out of the transmission. See, there's a big gap there in the pump that we can flip this thing around on. And before I forget, we need to take the vacuum line off the back of the pump there, the line that goes to the brake booster. So I'm gonna take that off real quick, and then we'll take the pump off. Okay, we got the Prindle switch out of the way. Now we're gonna take the pump off. See, that's what I was talking about. That gap right there will flip the pump right out. Okay, now we've got the pump out on the bench. And since we didn't have any actual brake problems, like brake assist issues, the pedal felt normal, all we had was the oil leak. We got the Resale kit. The Resale kit obviously comes with the gasket that goes to the engine, the metal gasket here, and then the big O-ring gasket for the cover. Now, if you go to replace this pump at the dealership or at an independent shop, these pumps can run anywhere between $200 to $400. This Resale kit, on the other hand, is $40. So this is definitely a good do-it-yourself kind of job to save you tons of money. after we got the pump cleaned up a little bit, we just inspected it to make sure it's not grooved or gouged on the inside, and make sure the ends of this look good. And we're ready to throw the new seals in and put it back on the car. Back on. Now we're going to put our new O-ring seal in for the cover. So that new seal is a little bit different style. It actually looks to be a little bit thicker. So they give you bigger bolts with flat washers to put in your old cover to make sure it pulls it down tight. Okay, so let's go over the tools we used real quick. We had a pair of pliers to get the spring-loaded clamps off the intake. We have a big 24mm socket for the Prindle switch. We have a 12mm socket for the Prindle switch and the bracket. We have a 10mm socket. We actually had two of those because I had one on my quarter drive. Then I used this extension to help me get the bolt started back into the vacuum pump. And this is a swivel or wobble extension, whatever you want to call it. You probably wouldn't have to have this though. Then we have a T30 Torx, a T25 Torx, a couple flathead screwdrivers. You probably wouldn't have to have both of those, but I used them. Our two ratchets and just my light, and I had that long extension for getting the bolts out of that transmission switch. You could probably get by without one that long, but that's it for the tools we used. So that wraps up the vacuum repair job we did on the Jetta. It wasn't a bad job. I would say anybody could do this job within 2 to 3 hours, and that's very conservative. If you wanted to get it done faster than that, depending on your skill level, I'm sure you could do it. We saved tons of money on this job. Like I said before, the pump would run somewhere between $200 to $300. We didn't need a pump. We had a good brake pedal, so we had good vacuum, and it was just leaking oil, which means mainly that outer rubber O-ring seal on the pump had started to leak. So we inspected the pump, it was good, so we put the new seals in, put it all back together, and saved tons of money. Guys, this repair could easily go somewhere around $1,000 if they actually figured the labor time in to pull that transmission. We didn't need to do that, and you shouldn't have to do that, and no shop should have to move the transmission. You know, sometimes the factory recommends certain things, but we can get around that. We don't actually have to do that. So you save yourself tons of money and tons of headache doing it this way. Thanks for stopping by and checking out this video. I'll see you next time on The Wrench Artist.